Hello everyone, I am your humble dungeon master, aPDTrain, and this is the story of the Crimson Skies campaign thus far. I want to dedicate this recap video to my fantastic group of players that have made this story come to life with their incredible energy, outlandish ideas, and heartfelt moments. The Crimson Skies campaign begins with the introduction and first meeting of our players, with a mysterious note slipped into their pockets directing them to meet outside of the town of Dunblane. The chosen party slowly begins to assemble. Arriving first is Midas Valdove, a half-elf artificer who is a member of the prestigious Golden Loom Guild, masters of arcane infusions and fashion. His craftsmanship has made quite the name for himself in the ranks of the guild, training for years under Master Balfine, lead artificer of the Golden Loom. Second to arrive is Nayland Stillrest, a Furbolg grave cleric of Kelemvor. After a tragic past resulting in the death of his family at the hands of his brother, Nayland set forth into the world to cleanse Stellaris of the undead and those who seek to wield necromancy magic. Strumming his lute and playing a merry tune is Eladrian Breezeleaf, the Air Genasi bard who just returned to Stellaris from many years voyaging the seas on the ship Tiratania with the Aarakocra pirate captain Wendina. The fourth to arrive is Zar Atel, a resident student of the Vunneth Institute of the Arcane. Buried in books most of his life, Zar set out after receiving the note from one of his teachers. The promises of new, arcane knowledge drive Zar forward as he searches for the kind of magic that can help his family most. The final member of the party is the paladin dwarf Holgrim Emberforge. Spending years of his life dedicated to his family's blacksmithing shop, the sudden passing of his mother drove Holgrim to seek different answers in life. He discovered the goddess Sylvanas and trained under a seasoned warrior of Sylvanas to become the paladin he is today. Gathered for the first time, they meet a mysterious member of the Crimson Sun. The man introduces himself as Zenel, and he directs the party to an ancient Crimson Sun tomb. In the tomb, it is believed that an ancient tome that was crafted by the previous Crimson Sun Grand Master, Master Norvam, resides. This tome is important to uncovering the powerful ancient relics of the long-deceased Overlord Baranos, remembered in Stellaris' history books for his blood-red crimson eyes. He was a powerful elven mage with immense magical powers, who sought to conquer Stellaris. His worshippers are the Crimson Moon, an opposing faction to the Crimson Sun. At the cost of their life, a member of the Crimson Sun was able to attain information that the Crimson Moon had been moving in secret under the direction of an apparent heir to the Overlord Baranos, going by the name Zilthana the Mother. After dealing with the trials that were laid in the tomb, the party was successfully able to find the book, but on their way out of the crypt, the party was ambushed by a large black dragon with someone standing upright on its back as it flew overhead. Standing atop the dragon was a half-elf man with distinct crimson eyes, wearing an ornate crown. The tome of Grandmaster Norvam reacted in proximity to the crown, but before the party could act, the man used the power of the crown to knock the party unconscious. Waking up in the nearby town of Dunblane, the party awoke to the sounds of battle. A swarm of goblins had begun pillaging the small town. The party was able to fend off the invasion, but soon discovered that the creatures were forced to attack the town against their will. Upon further investigation, the party discovered that these creatures appeared from a nearby underground tunnel. Part of its passageway was blocked by a mysterious arcane barrier that was impenetrable by normal means. The party was tasked by the leader of the village of Dunblane, an Aarakocra named Durik, to head to Vrento and tell the leadership about what happened in Dunblane. The party sets out on this journey, and while they travel to Vrento, we change perspectives, following the trail of the half-elf Dragon Rider. In an unknown network of caves, the Dragon Rider joins 5 other figures, one of which sits upon an impressive Gothic-styled throne. A meeting of the Crimson Moon takes place as we are introduced to Zilthana, the Mother. She has a thin silhouette wearing elegant black robes, and her face is covered by a thin black veil. But through the veil, piercing crimson eyes stare back at the Dragon Rider entering the room. Thalmorn, the Dragon Rider, and firstborn son of Zilthana, a large, muscular half-elf with tied-back brown hair and pale skin. His face is shaved with a strong and defined jawline. He is adorned in black plate armor with ornate gold detailing, but his crimson eyes take center focus when you look upon him. Thalmorn gives Zilthana the crown that he had retrieved. The other siblings in the room then join in on the conversation. Hasna, the drow sorceress, wearing long, dark robes bearing the symbol of the Crimson Moon on the back in a contrasting white color. She has long, smooth black hair with bangs that reach down towards her collarbone, slightly obscuring her face. Her pale, bluish skin is revealed as she moved, and her hair sways back and forth, but her skin is offset by her bright, crimson eyes. Ellipsis, a red-skinned, demon-like creature with horns curving upward from her forehead. A slim tail slowly rocks back and forth behind her. She has thin wings sprouting from her back, with the webbing almost being translucent, but capable of flight. Wearing only a cloth breastband and skirt, she has a large spiked maul strapped to her back. Her mouth reveals jagged teeth, and her crimson red eyes almost blend in with her skin tone. Kalinar, a battle-hardened Duragar with snow-white hair tied back in a high knot. His beard is slim, seemingly only growing from his chin down towards his mid-chest. He is clad in black rings of chainmail, and his crimson eyes make his skin seem like an even darker shade of purple. Nidal is a shape-shifting doppelganger. His skin is a dark shade of blue, with the crimson eyes being his only distinct feature. His body is thin, sinewy, and completely hairless, until he transforms. After the conversation with Zilthana, Kalinar is sent north to Stonecaster Mountain, where another powerful relic of the Overlord Baranos is believed to be hidden. With that, we transition back to our party. Leaving Dunblane, the party encounters someone trying to sell merchandise that they said was given away by a high-ranking member of the Golden Loom. Midas, immediately intrigued by this news, interrogated the man. He learned that his master, Balfine, had left the Golden Loom, giving away his catalog of items to the people. Midas stewed on this information as they continued their journey. After traveling for a day or so, the party arrived at the southern gates of Vrento. The gate is surrounded by a crowd of people, talking about the recent attacks by monsters on their home. With many people on edge, the party enters into the capital city of Vrento. The city of Vrento receives plenty of sunlight all year round, and the temperature consistently feels like a warm spring day. This has resulted in very elegant and gorgeous flowers, plants, and trees to grow and blossom all throughout the city. The smell of cooking meats and flowery aromas dance through the streets of Vrento. The yelling of shopkeepers to the passing citizens, the sound of arguments between merchants, and the merriment that takes place within the various bars and inns along the main center strip of Rento leaves plenty to gawk at. But the party has very important information to deliver. They are met by a young monk from the Crimson Sun, and are guided to the Crimson Sun Temple that is nestled in the back of the political district. Approaching the temple, the path to the gates is surrounded by cherry blossom trees that form an archway covering over top. Arriving at the large red wooden gates, the temple is surrounded by 10-foot-high stone walls that are beige in color. Opening the gates reveals a large outdoor training area where a few Crimson Sun monks are currently training. The large courtyard has various tools and obstacles that the monks use to perfect their techniques and bodies. There is a large stone staircase that leads into the main temple grounds. The party enters into the temple, and at the back of the room is a large marble statue of Grandmaster Taigao, the very first Grandmaster. Various candles and incense are burning in front of it, and there is a skylight that shines sunlight directly onto the statue. The young monk escorting the party begins to transform and reveals himself to be Grandmaster Shamar, the current leader of the Crimson Sun. Shamar begins explaining the significance of the tome that the party is carrying. The tome was a catalogue crafted by Grandmaster Norvam after he witnessed the battle between the Overlord Baranos and Grandmaster Taigao. In a final attempt to stop Baranos, Taigao initiated a soul-binding technique that fused their two souls together. In the process, the 5 relics worn by Baranos scattered across Stellaris. Norvam traveled across Stellaris to find and document information about these items, while at the same time putting safeguards in place to protect the objects from falling into the wrong hands. But with the news that the Crimson Moon is on the move to find these objects, Grandmaster Shamar needed to recruit talented individuals from outside of the Order of the Crimson Sun in order to move against them in secret under the guise of an adventuring party. In order to protect Stellaris and its people, as well as work towards accomplishing their own personal goals, the party agrees to work with the Crimson Sun to find these objects and stop the Crimson Moon from bringing ruin to Stellaris. By happenstance, while inspecting the pages of the tome, an image of the crown that was worn by the Dragon Rider had materialized on the 4th page of the book. The group was unsure how the image appeared, but while discussing where they should go next, the party utters the phrase, "compass," and they feel the tome of Grandmaster Norvan begin to pull them towards the north, towards Kraknar. With the destination set, the party heads towards their northern destination. On their travels, they came across 2 men carrying a deceased body on a stretcher. The men were from the town of Valakin and recognized Holgrim and Nayland from their previous acts of heroism protecting Valakin from an incursion of the undead. Unfortunately, one of the men had been viciously injured by a group of rampaging beasts and had succumbed to his injuries. The party aided the men in bringing home their deceased companion, but during the night, the party was attacked by these beasts that resembled hyena-like humanoid creatures. Successfully fending them off and protecting the injured men, the party quickly made their way to Valakin. The party was welcomed with open arms into the town. The leader of Valakin, whom was an elderly gnome named Orston, had asked Nayland if he would perform the last rites for the burial of the deceased man that they escorted home. Nayland agreed to this, and the party waited out the remainder of the day in the local inn known as the Stopover. The inn was run by a very outgoing and bubbly halfling in her 30s named Quinbin Stoutwillow, or Quinn for short. The party was able to rest comfortably for the day in preparation for the funeral service later that night. The full moon high in the sky, the villagers gathered for the last rites of their fallen townsfolk. The funeral service was beautiful as the mourning villagers comforted each other. Orston was giving a speech to the town when suddenly, blood-curdling howls echoed in the night sky as a spear descended from the darkness and pierced through Orston's body, killing him instantly. The party braced for battle as another pack of the creatures, the same as the ones they had faced the night before, invaded the town. But this time, led by a large, hulking, humanoid hyena creature nearly twice the size of the others. A battle broke out in the town. Some of the townsfolk were unable to avoid the wrath of the creatures, as our party did their best to protect them. In the midst of battle, aid came in the form of a paladin of Sylvanus, a half-orc named Gurin. He distracted the leader of the creatures as our party dispatched the rest. In a group effort, they were successfully able to slay the beast. Holgrim bowed to this paladin Gurin, as he was the one who trained Holgrim for the past 3 years. Gurin told the group that there have been many strange creatures stirring about all over Stellaris, and that many of the smaller towns may not be safe. Tending to their wounds and mourning the loss of more of the villagers, including the village elder Orston, the party had their suspicions that the Crimson Moon were involved in these monster attacks. The party went back to the Stopover Inn and had an uneasy rest, for much innocent blood had been spilt this night. The night passed, and the party needed to press onwards to Kraknar to the north. However, the citizens of Valakin wished to reward the heroes for their efforts and offered them a payment of gold. But the party denied their gracious gift and wished for them to use it to rebuild the town from the mayhem that had been caused by the creatures the night before. With the matter settled, the group began to traverse north towards Kraknar. The air began to change as the party traveled farther north. The warm spring air of central Stellaris was now changing to the frigid and frosty air of the north that penetrated deep into their bodies. Passing through vicious blizzards and the slaying of the apex predators of the region known as owlbears, the party finally arrived in Kraknar, hometown to Holgrim. The villagers here are strong and durable in order to live in the climate that is native to the northern part of Stellaris. Much like Valakin, the people here work together to survive. The homes are built from the sturdy trees of the snow-sunburned woods. The homes appear like cabins with large chimneys that spew out soot from the fires that are constantly lit inside. Holgrim leads the group to the Icy Elk Inn that his childhood friend Soldara Stoneanvil now owns. While catching up with her, Holgrim learns that she and his brother Dolthram are engaged to be married, and it dawns on Holgrim that being away from home for over 3 years, you miss out on a lot of the news. The party stays the night at the inn, and the following morning, Holgrim sets out early to visit his family's blacksmith and forge. Seeing his father and brother for the first time in a long time, there was some palpable tension, as Holgrim had left Kraknar not long after his mother Ingwin had passed away. The Ember Forge's business had been in a bit of a decline as the costs of fueling the forge were getting higher. Holgrim mentioned seeing a type of ore being used by the smiths in Vrento to fuel their forges. Dolthram explained that the ore is known as corsine, a mineral that is mined in the Stonecaster Mountain. The corsine has special properties that allow it to store and expel certain types of magic. The raw corsine is brought to Vrento, and members of the Crimson Sun are somehow able to refine it to be used for these everyday purposes. However, Stonecaster mines are owned by Lord Polliver Stonecaster, a nobleman whose family has owned the mines for generations. With an awkward goodbye to his father and a firm handshake with his brother, Holgrim headed back to the party at the Icy Elk Inn, keeping the true reason for his visit back to Kraknar a secret from his family. The party uses the tome of Master Norvam, and it continues to pull them north, in the direction of the Stonecaster Mountain. On their way out of the city, they see a large crowd of concerned villagers being held back by the Vrento Guard. They are yelling out towards a very large estate belonging to Lord Poliver Stonecaster. The miners from the village did not return from their regular shifts at the mines, nor did the caravans that shuttle the miners back and forth. The villagers' worries were answered by a well-respected leader of the Vrento Guard named Captain Xander. A large and rugged man of the north, he told the people that a battalion of guards led by Sergeant Mary Ice, a female tabaxi, would head towards the mines to investigate. The party holds back for a time, before following the guards to Stonecaster Mountain, so they would not draw attention to themselves and their true purpose for coming to the mountain. As the party drew closer to the mines, the Stonecaster Mountain began to eclipse the sunlight as its peak rises high into the sky. As they approached, they heard the sound of yelling men, clanging metal, and the familiar shrieks of goblins. The party walks into a battlefield, taking place right at the entrance to the Stonecaster Mountain. The Vrento Guards battling to the death against a horde of goblins which pour out of the mine. The battle was hard fought, and the battalion of guards sent to the mine had been slain, except for Sergeant Mary Ice, who thanked the party for their assistance in the battle. Before heading back to Kraknar for reinforcements, she begged the party to continue investigating what had transpired inside the Stonecaster mine. As the group ventured inside, they witnessed the remnants of the slaughter of various miners at the hands of the foul goblins. Descending deeper into the mines, the party encountered a new type of threat. Large, lumbering, and muscular creatures with various shades of green skin and protruding tusks from their lower jaws. These creatures were searching for something at the bottom of the mine. Clearing out a small group of these creatures, the party found a tablet in the clutches of one of them. The tablet had various letters on it, but also had the insignia of the Crimson Sun imprinted on it. With no answer to the mystery of the tablet, the party descended further down into the mines. The party heard an unknown language echoing from a nearby chamber. They then entered into a large, expansive room. At first glance, this place glows a bright yellowish-orange color, the light seemingly emitted from the large chasms splitting the ground. Sconces line the room with a glowing stone corsine giving off additional light. This area is warmer than the rest of the frigid Stonecaster mine, an unnatural heat compared to the journey to the mountain and the mines below. Peering down into the chasms, the party sees a river of rapids down below, generating the orange and yellow colors that decorate the interior of this open space. The colors appear to be mixing, churning, and rippling with the current of the rapids, as the heat and warmth coming from the rapids, even 20 feet down below, is palpable. A booming voice once again echoes through the chamber. Standing tall at the center of the stone bridge that crosses over a chasm below is a dwarf, but with pale, almost purplish skin, snow-white hair tied back in a high knot. His beard is slim, seemingly only growing from his chin down towards his mid-chest. There are 2 curved blades sheathed on each side of his waist. He is adorned in an intricate set of spiked armor, with fine, thin veins of red and gold weaved throughout the armor in various inconsistent patterns. Amidst all that you see when you take in this person's appearance, what really catches your gaze are his crimson eyes. Bright, crimson-colored eyes that pierce through the orange and yellow light illuminating this room. He gives orders to these creatures to find it. The party tried to sneak through the chamber, but were caught by the creatures, who then signaled out to the others in the room. A long battle ensued, and many of these creatures were slain, but Holgrim is knocked unconscious in the fray. The Duragar with crimson eyes eventually enters the battle after many of his orcs are slain. The party are desperate in their attempts to stop him, but their attacks appear to have little effect against him. From the entrance of the chamber, moaning and groaning can be heard, as shifting and sliding footsteps of numerous people approach the room. The multitude of miners that were slain throughout the mine had been reanimated and blocked off any means of escape for the party. Slowly, the hobbling masses of zombies moved aside for their master. A drow woman wearing long, dark, silky flowing robes passed by the multitude of zombified miners. She had long, smooth black hair with bangs that reached down towards her collarbone, slightly obscuring her face. Her pale bluish skin is revealed with each step as her hair swayed back and forth. But beneath her hair, bright crimson eyes draw your attention. And in the moment the party catches her gaze, they are paralyzed and unable to move a finger. Sharp words are exchanged between the Duergar and the Drow. Their names are revealed in the conversation: Kalinar and Kazna. A discussion about a mother ensues between the two, and with authority in her voice, she tells Kalinar to fall back, as this mother wishes to speak with him immediately. Reluctantly, Kalinar obliges and proceeds to leave the mine without finishing off the party. Kazna then begins to talk to the currently frozen party. She spoke about the inherent power of magic, vaguely mentioning some of the deepest desires of the party. How she knew about their desires is still unknown. By the end of her conversation, she undoes the spell binding the zombies to the material plane, as well as releasing the party from their state of paralysis. Asna then vanishes from the mine, as it appears that this was not her true body. She turns to dust and is carried out by the air currents circulating in the chamber. The party slowly regained their faculties and tended to Holgrim's wounds, hearing a large crash that echoed from the main area that housed the elevator to leave the mine. The crash shook the very foundation of the mine itself, and dust shifted from the walls, causing it to gently fall like snow to the ground. Investigating the source of the noise revealed that the thick ropes that hoist the elevator had been sliced, trapping the party at the bottom of the Stonecaster mine. With no options for escape, the party investigated the large chamber that they had just battled in. At the back of the room, there was an inscription. With the moon behind me, I would normally have to watch my back, but this time, I appear to be 3 steps ahead. N. And the inscription displayed the Crimson Sun emblem next to it as well. After much deliberation, Nayland was able to crack the mystery of the tablet that they had found previously. With a stern belief in what he thought to be right, Nayland jumped down into the chasms below. The rest of the party, although reluctant to do so, followed Nayland's lead and jumped in after him. The party plunged into scorching hot liquid, but they were still alive. The current of those underground rapids pulled them all the way down into a secret underground chamber. Entering this chamber, a pair of gauntlets were suspended in midair. The tome of Grandmaster Norvam began to vibrate and pulse as the image of the gauntlets began to appear on the cover of the tome itself, just as the crown did when they encountered the Dragon Rider wearing it. Zar, with great excitement, opened the tome of Norvam and found that the second page of the tome displayed an image of the objects known as the Locking Gauntlets, as well as a brief history of the item. At the back of the chamber was a spiral staircase leading upwards. After an hour or so of climbing up the staircase, they were met with a thick wall of bedrock at the top of the stairs. Holgrim decided to equip the gauntlets that they had just discovered, and with a mighty punch, Holgrim was able to punch through the bedrock, revealing a small cave near the top of the Stonecaster Mountain. Holgrim became immediately fatigued using the gauntlets, and the group, now finally out of the mines and in a safe area, were able to rest. But the small cave was familiar to Eladrian. It was, in fact, the cave that his family used to live in before they began making a living in the mainland of Stellaris. Many questions raced through Eladrian's mind, but a comforting feeling of nostalgia from being in his old home was able to put him at ease. The party descended the mountain as Eladrian and his family had done many times, by leaping from the top and quickly falling down to the ground below. But with the help of a well-timed feather fall by Eladrian, the party was able to land safely on the ground. They were seen by some of the Vrento guard that had came to the Stonecaster Mountain as reinforcements, the guards quickly surrounding the party, but they were put at ease by Sergeant Mary Ice, who vouched for our heroes. Captain Xander and Mary Ice discussed the events that transpired with the party on the voyage back to Kraknar. The party discussed the creatures they encountered in the mines. However, they kept the information about the people with crimson eyes and their own mission a secret. The party is brought back to Kraknar and led directly to Lord Polliver Stonecaster's estate, where they once again discussed what transpired in the mines. Lord Polliver promised a great reward for their heroism that would be granted to them in an official ceremony. The dangers so close to home weighed heavily on Holgrim's mind. He had missed his family, and with looming danger nearby, he began to wonder if protecting them should be his priority. The next day, at a ceremony in front of Lord Polliver's estate, the commander of the Vrento Guard in Kraknar, Captain Xander, christened the party as Heroes of Kraknar, and they were henceforth known as the Mighty Ducks. The city of Kraknar reveled in the celebration of a new famous adventuring group. As the Mighty Ducks pass through the crowd, they see a familiar face. That is Zanel of the Crimson Sun. With him was a Harengon woman named Kore Riviani. She had powerful magic at her disposal, but her true passion is for the culinary arts, and her desire to be an esteemed member of the Gourmands, Vrento's highest prestige culinary guild, catering to the highest quality clientele. The Mighty Ducks discussed what truly transpired at the bottom of the Stonecaster mines with Zanel and Kore, the encounters with Kalinar and Kazna, their crimson eyes, and the discovery of the locking gauntlets. At Zanel's request, the Mighty Ducks agreed to have Kore join them on their mission to stop the Crimson Moon, and the Mighty Ducks gave the gauntlets to Zanel to bring back to the Crimson Sun Temple for safekeeping. Preparing to set out on their next adventure back to Vrento, Holgrim is haunted by what occurred at the bottom of the Stonecaster mine. He was knocked unconscious while his friends did battle against a powerful foe. Thoughts of losing his family in Kraknar and losing his new friends, the Mighty Ducks. He had to make a tough decision. Unable to say goodbye to his friends, he left a note for the rest of the Mighty Ducks. It reads as follows. My friends, it is with a heavy heart that I write this letter. I did not know how to bring this up to you all in person, but I've decided to go back and train with Paladin Gurim. In that last fight when I was knocked out, it proved to me that I am not quite ready yet to take on the threat that is the Crimson Moon. I also need this time to be with my family. I have been away from them for so long, and so many things have changed since I left. I wish to be present for my brother's wedding to Soldara. We've all witnessed the atrocities in Stellaris, and I just need some time to experience some happiness. If you ever need me, I'll be there. Just send me one of those paper birds and I'll come to you if I can. I'll make sure to make my legs even stronger so that I can piggyback you even further, Zar. Eladrian, I hope to make it into one of your songs. Midas, I hope that you'll do me the honor of tailoring me a fine suit for my brother's wedding. And Naylan, my friend, keep fighting the good fight, and I pray that Kelemvor will continue to protect you. Your friend, Holgrim Emberforge, chosen of the Crimson Sun, and proud member of the Mighty Ducks. With their friend Holgrim deciding to stay behind, and a new member, Kore, coming along, the Mighty Ducks departed from Kraknar and began the journey back to Valakin. Trudging through the snowy landscape of northern Stellaris, the group encountered an elderly woman and her deceased son in a tent on the side of the path to Valakin. Engaging in conversation with the woman, the group discovered that the man in the tent was not only deceased, but had chunks of his flesh seemingly chewed off. The elderly woman then began to shift and deform as she felt the magical remnants of the locking gauntlets that the Mighty Ducks had on their person just the previous day. The party was now facing a winter hag that has direct ties with the Crimson Moon. A fierce battle in the snow-covered fields took place as blizzarding winds were summoned by the hag. The Mighty Ducks were able to vanquish the hag as its body eroded and decayed immediately in front of them. Shaking off their wounds, the party quickly ventured to Valakin for a safe place to rest for the night. The Mighty Ducks arrived back in Valakin and headed over to the Stopover Inn. The owner of the Stopover Inn, Quinn Stoutwillow, runs over to the group and heartily welcomes them back. But it appears that her and Kore have a history together, as the two friends give each other a huge hug. And Quinn tells Kore that someone is waiting for her upstairs. The rest of the party stayed downstairs and had a meal and drinks with the townsfolk. Kore headed to one of the private rooms at the inn, and inside she sees a very young Harengon child, her daughter named Des. The two spent a few hours together as Kore tries to explain to Des why she is leaving and going on an adventure. Des and Kore had lived in Valakin for a few years, with Quinn watching out for Des while Kore is away. Quinn is a very supportive friend to Kore, always pushing her to achieve her lifelong passion of becoming a gourmand in Vrento. The party stayed the night in Valakin, each of them exhausted from the journey from Kraknar and the rousing party the night before. While he slept, Zar had visions of his younger sister Neza in Vrento, seeing her speak with their sick mother, journeying to the Vunith Institute of the Arcane, and reading a book of some kind. Then finally, the dream ended with Zar seeing his sister leave the walls of Vrento, heading out of the southern gates of the city. Waking up from that dream, Zar had a difficult time getting back to sleep, but the night does pass, and in the morning, Zar notices that some of his tiefling features had further developed. The group then bids farewell to Valakin, and they travel back to Vrento. Vrento is as lively as it has ever been, but there does seem to be more men and women donned in armory and weaponry. The attacks from various monsters and creatures does not seem to have slowed down in the area, and the citizens are taking it upon themselves to protect one another. A new militia was formed in the city to specifically deal with these monster attacks. But the Mighty Ducks are looking to tackle the root of the issue as they travel through the city towards the Crimson Sun Temple. They learn that the gauntlets were safely delivered by Zanel, and the group is told about a black market group down in Onagas that had recently discovered an ancient object in an abandoned temple in the White Sand Sea. The group decided to hold a tournament where the winners would not only win a sizable fortune, but also receive this object as well. Believing it to be a relic of the Overlord Baranos, the Mighty Ducks now have a new objective: the desert city of Onagas. Before leaving Vrento, the Mighty Ducks take care of some things around town. Midas used his expert skills as a tailor to design new wardrobes for the group's next adventure. Eladrian picked up a new magical lute, and Corey was very busy ogling the Gourmand's Guild Hall from the outside windows, where there are various live chefs catering to high-class individuals. Zar and Nayland ventured into the Bunith Institute of the Arcane to learn more about what Zar's sister Neza was investigating, led there by Zar's dream the night before. After their preparations in Vrento were completed, the group ventured southeast towards Onagast. On their journey, the party came across a traveling musical group. Various bards and storytellers happily shared a meal with the Mighty Ducks. Among the bards was a young musical prodigy, an air genasi boy named Zephyr. During tales of their exploits over a meal, the bards began to pack up and leave, but not before the leader of the troupe mentioned that the young boy's full name was Zephyr Breezely. Unbeknownst to Eladrian, during the years he traveled aboard the pirate ship Tiratania, his family had had another child. Zephyr explained that Dornian and Ryzelia, his parents, were distraught for years at the disappearance of their son Eladrian. They moved their home to Balland in order to be able to look out towards the sea, hoping on the slim chance that their son would return to them. But after 3 years of grief and no signs that Eladrian was alive, they decided to have another child. Both Eladrian and Zephyr were shocked that the other one existed, but the bardic troupe needed to bring Zephyr back to his parents in Balland. They would be sure to tell the Breezeleys that their son Eladrian was alive and well. With a shocking revelation behind them, the group pressed onwards towards Onagast, but a monumental hurdle lied ahead of them: the journey across the White Sand Sea. The perilous desert that none of the Mighty Ducks had ever encountered before. Just walking into the area made the sweat instantly drip from their brows. The sun beaming its intense heat high in the sky without a cloud to be seen. As the night brought about a slight reprieve from the oppressive heat, the Mighty Ducks found refuge at the first and last outpost, a place where they could rest for the night, obtain supplies, and inquire about a means of travel across the desert. The party learned that they could use trained desert serpents available to rent at the stables owned by the first and last outpost. After Corey came to an agreement with Narprax, the dragonborn owner of the stables, they chose Goldie, a young but energetic desert serpent that would shuttle them across the desert. Deciding to spend the night, the Mighty Ducks would set out across the White Sand Sea in the morning. At the rise of the morning sun, a knock at the window of the room the party was staying in woke up the party. A paper bird, a means of sending someone a message in Stellaris, flapped around the room. This paper bird, however, was different. It appeared to be made of a patchwork of fleshy, sewn-together skin, with speckles of blood splashing the room every time it flapped its wings. The letter landed on Nayland with a wet flop. Reading the letter, Nayland immediately knew that he needed to leave. The letter was from his brother Calvin, the man responsible for the death of his mother and father, and a practitioner of necromancy magic, was here on Stellaris. The letter was antagonizing Nayland to come and find him. His brother was the cause of all the grief in his life, and the driving force to becoming a cleric of Kalembor. He needed to leave the Mighty Ducks for the time being to pursue Calvin. A solemn goodbye was had, as Nayland packed his bag and set out on his own personal journey. The space in the party is not left vacant for too long, as before the party set out on their journey to Onagast through the White Sand Sea, they met a blue dragonborn that goes by the name of Drag-O-Nista, a queen of glitter and sparkles, who's looking to make their name known down in Onagast. After a discussion amongst the group, the Ducks agreed to have Drag-O-Nista tag along on their adventure. In addition to being almost as well dressed as Midas, Drag-O-Nista is a whopping 7-foot-tall, muscle-bound barbarian, adding a bit of much-needed muscle and makeup to the team. The party sets off into the desert with Goldie pulling their sled in order to make it to Onagas, which is a 3-day journey through the scorching hot, white sand sea. During the first night of their journey, as the group rested and took watch by the campfire, a dagger flew in from the darkness of the night and landed right next to Zar's leg. A large man wearing desert attire and who had facial tattoos emerged from the dark, warning the group to be cautious of the hidden dangers of the desert. Pulling the dagger out of the ground next to Zar revealed an impaled desert slumber scorpion. With caution of their own, the group agreed to allow this man named Kozin to join them on their journey towards Onagas, as Kozin had a very important goal there to take care of. On their journey through the White Sand Sea, Kozin filled in the Mighty Ducks about the slaughter of his tribe while he was away on a resource scouting mission. The attack against his tribe was orchestrated by a newly crowned leader of the Desert Raiders who goes by the name of Zavathul. Kozin seeks vengeance and retribution against all raiders, but especially their leader. Venturing through the desert, surviving swarming wasps, and an attack by a group of raiders traveling on battle-ready desert sleds, the Mighty Ducks are able to find refuge from the sweltering heat inside an oasis. They met a pair of merchants who are on their way to the first and last outpost to drop off supplies, but they are in a hurry to get back to Onagas in order to watch the competition that will be taking place. An event known as Feast or Famine is being hosted by a group known as the Omen. The party was told that the Omen controls much of what goes on in Onagas, even with the presence of the Vrento Guard in the city. These traders also discussed the prevalence of a new drug that has been taking over Onagas, a drug going by the name Verdini. The Mighty Ducks were told to find a person named the Whisper in the Pleasure District of Onagas. The Whisper was their way of getting into the Feast or Famine competition. One final day through the desert had finally brought the Mighty Ducks to the desert city of Onagas, located on the southeast point of Stellaris. The large settlement is surrounded by large pale red stone walls, and the same colored stones are used for the architecture of the homes in the city. Various lights of differing colors danced and shined throughout the city. In the far distance behind the city of Onagas, there is a small lake of water, and beyond that, reaching up high into the clouds, the legendary mountains that encircle the island of Stellaris, the impenetrable Stellaris Mountain Barrier. The mountains stretch to the east and west all the way out to the horizon. Arriving at the stables on the outside of the city, the group dropped off Goldie and headed into the city. Walking through the large gates of Onagas, there is an overpowering scent of various foreign aromas. The smells of perfumes tickled the nostrils, and the alluring odor of grilled foods with unknown spices filled the air in between. Musicians played their instruments in the streets, and the light-hearted melody feels like a warm welcome after the Mighty Ducks spent days traveling through the White Sand Sea. The citizens here wear loose cloth attire that appeared light and breathable. There is a sense of community here as children ran through the streets and people stopped to chat with one another. Kozin told the group that he needed to look into some important things in the city, and he leaves them to discover the city for themselves. The Mighty Ducks take a bit of time to explore the streets of Onagas, getting to experience the culture. The party takes over the Bottomless Mug Tavern as Eladrian rocked the house and became the life of the party, gaining the Ducks a cheering squad before the Feast or Famine event began. Dragonista learned about a drag show that would be occurring in the Pleasure District the next night. Midas talked to a potential distributor of various fine silks and cloth materials for his own personal brand. And Kore learned about a well-known chef in the area who may be able to teach her a thing or two. Later in the evening, as the party headed to bed in a large hostel, Zar woke up in the middle of the night and met a young man named Alden. The two of them shared a conversation about their lives, and Alden tells Zar that he and his friends would be participating in the Feast or Famine competition to hopefully help their families escape a life of poverty. Alden also gave Zar some crucial information that the Feast or Famine had an entry fee in order to join, 40 gold pieces per person. In return for the information, Zar gave Alden a token of friendship in the form of a dagger. The night passed, and the next day began, getting ever closer to the start date of Feast or Famine, one more day from now. The Mighty Ducks awoke, and Zar informed them all about the cost of the competition. They needed money, and they needed it fast. There were various jobs that could be done in Onagas, but Kore had her heart set on meeting this famous chef at the restaurant known as the Pickled Cactus. The group ventured there, and Kore met the famous chef named Clarion. Kore described her aspirations to join the Gourmands, and Chef Clarion informed her that she would need 3 recommendations from well-respected chefs throughout Stellaris in order to take on the Gourmands entrance exam. Clarion gave Kore the chance to earn a recommendation at his restaurant, as Kore had brought a very rare fruit that she found in the oasis out in the White Sand Sea. With her skills on full display, Kore was able to flawlessly replicate the dessert that Clarion had taught her how to make. Kore had earned herself Clarion's recommendation and is now one step closer to achieving her goal of becoming a gourmand. The Mighty Ducks then explored more of Onagas, and eventually made their way to the Pleasure District. They were looking to sell off some of the items that they had picked up in the desert, and were told that they would be able to sell off some of the desert honey that they found at a place called the Desert Orchid. Entering into the Desert Orchid revealed a very high-end brothel that was heavily guarded by members of the Omen. In dealing with the madam of the establishment, Madame Savan, he was able to set up a meeting with the Whisper, the member of the Omen responsible for signing up groups for Feast or Famine. Upon entering the VIP room of the brothel, the Mighty Ducks saw the philanderer known as the Whisper, surrounded by many women. The Whisper is a young half-elf, only in his 30s. He has a red mohawk that flowed long in the back, and his head was shaved on the sides. He wore a leather circlet around his head to help keep his hair in place. Both of his eyebrows have piercings, and next to his bright green eyes is a small skull omen tattoo. A black cloth mask was pulled down under his chin, and he wore a leather trench coat with the collar lifted upwards, covering his jaw from the sides. Zar was able to recognize the Whisper for who he truly was: his older, adopted brother, Trachis Atel. While Trachis was unable to help the Mighty Ducks afford their entry fee into the Feast or Famine competition, he did give them a bit more information about the prize that the winning team would receive. In addition to the large sum of money collected by the Omen, there was also a decorative magical bracer with an intricate serpent design and a large red jewel on the snake's head. Somehow, the Omen were able to distill the drug Verdini from this magical item and sell it to the people of Onagas. However, it appeared to have backfired on them, as Verdini was an extremely addictive substance and would drive people mad with withdrawal symptoms if they were unable to take the drug. Not wanting to ravage the people of Onagas with addiction to this powerful drug, the Omen decided to host an event to give away this troublesome item, while at the same time making some profits off of the competition. The Mighty Ducks were a bit displeased with them just giving away an item like that, but believing this bracer to be the relic that the tome of Master Norvam was pointing towards, the Mighty Ducks helped some people in town and were able to acquire enough gold to pay their way into Feast or Famine. Later that night in the Pleasure District, a large drag show competition was being held. Dragonista had some fierce competition against the other queens. There was Kit and Caboodle, I Leaned Over, and the reigning champion, Macy Sumcox. With the help of Midas doing some quick stitch work for her outfits, Dragonista was able to come out on top and win the drag show. Riding high off of her win, Dragonista declared to the gathered crowds in the Pleasure District that Onagas should watch out for the future victors of Feast or Famine, the Mighty Ducks. With the Feast or Famine competition starting tomorrow, the party heads back to their rooms for one more, slightly uneasy night of rest. The day of the Feast or Famine competition was here. The Mighty Ducks were told to gather at the stables outside of Onagas, where Goldie, the desert serpent that brought them across the desert, was ready and waiting for them. The Feast or Famine was being held at some ancient ruins that the Omen had taken over. Just before they left, Kozin, the man that they had met while crossing the White Sand Sea, asked to join them in the Feast or Famine competition. While he was in the city, he learned that Zavathul, the leader of the Desert Raiders, was going to be taking part in Feast or Famine. Kozin was even able to acquire the gold for the entrance fee. Happy to have him along, the Mighty Ducks set out for the ruins. Arriving at the ruins, the party saw a large gathering of people waiting to get into the venue. Being participants in the competition, however, the Mighty Ducks were immediately escorted inside the ruins by a member of the Omen, and were greeted with a large stone staircase descending 100 feet down into the ground below. There were guests that were making their way slowly down the staircase, and there were also a few Omen guards standing throughout the long set of stairs. The staircase down into the ground was supported by a framework of large stones overhead. The architecture of these ruins was quite mysterious in their design and execution. The faint sounds of music and the rambunctious crowd grew louder and louder as the party reached the end of the stairs and emerged into the Feast or Famine arena. The interior of these ruins revealed an extremely expansive room that almost felt as if you were outside. There were large chunks of the ore Corsine embedded in the ceiling that's over 100 feet high from the ground, giving off a white light that brightened the entire place. About 100 feet away from the staircase, a large, massive stone wall that stands about 50 feet high blocked the view from seeing the rest of this interior of the space. But there were two large staircases that led up and around the stone wall on the left and right sides. From a brief glance, these stairs appeared to lead where the people would watch the events of Feast or Famine unfold. There were a large gathering of different races and people of various social statuses. There were vendors selling food and ale, as well as fun hats and other items that made noise. Merchandise with the phrase Feast or Famine on it in a variety of languages were being sold at the venue as well. A small area in the corner of the arena was filled with smoke as people were partaking in substances before watching the game. Side conversations being held about what Feast or Famine events could involve. Side bets were agreed upon, handshakes and smirks could be seen on the faces of some, while others could be seen holding a betting slip and were on their knees praying in a corner, hoping today will be the day they strike it rich. All of the people here were eagerly awaiting the start of the competition. The Mighty Ducks were escorted to a waiting room to stay before the Feast or Famine commenced. Mentally and physically preparing themselves for what would unfold, time passed slowly for the party, until the doorway in their waiting room illuminated with arcane symbols, signaling the beginning of Feast or Famine. Passing through the doorway, the Mighty Ducks exited out into a smaller room with a portcullis gate in front of them. Through the gate, there was an arena of flattened dirt, with adjacent walls that formed a half-moon shape connected to the large stone walls where the Feast or Famine would take place. There were also other portcullis gates that lined the walls beside them. The crowds that were high up in the stands are completely silent as they waited for the announcements to begin. The familiar voice of the Whisper began to speak. His voice was projected throughout the entire arena by some kind of magical means. he started to introduce the teams that would be participating in Feast or Famine. Of course, we have the Mighty Ducks in the competition, but we also have the Paladins of the Advent, a group of warriors with a prowess for battle and conquest hailing from outside of Stellaris. Scorpion's Trust, a group of Ruckians trying to make a name for themselves in Onagas in direct competition with the Omen. The Gutter Rats, led by the young man Alden, whom Zar met in the hostel they had stayed at, is joined by 3 other young men, who appeared quite nervous to be there. Swan's Grace, led by the former drag show champion Macy Sumcox, entered the arena with amazing pageantry. A small group of the Vento Guard joined the competition, looking to claim the money and treasure for the government. The Midnight Ravens, a group of up-and-coming adventurers hailing from Blasmont. And the final group to arrive in the arena was led by Zavathul, the target of Kozen's vengeance. Stepping out into the light of the arena was a large, muscular male lizard folk. Standing at 6'6", he had light green and beige scales with orange eyes. He wore a cloak made of some kind of animal pelt and had numerous scars across his body. He appeared to be wearing some kind of makeshift crown and carried a large blade that was ablaze with an intense orange flame. The Whisper then turned to the leader of the Omen, a large, mysterious figure who disguised their true identity to the public. The leader gave the competitors a speech to rally them and prepare them for what may lie inside the maze that is Feast or Famine. The Feast or Famine began with the sound of a cannon as the contenders entered into the walls of the maze. Surrounding the Mighty Ducks were walls that extended upwards 50 feet, and the area was illuminated by the core scene that was embedded in the ceiling of the arena. The interior of the maze, that is Feast or Famine, appeared to consist of magical puzzles and traps. The Mighty Ducks were able to get through the first roadblock, and in turn, they met someone inside the maze. A halfling woman, only around 3'2", introduced herself to the Mighty Ducks as their handler inside of the Feast or Famine. The handler has platinum blonde hair, almost white. Her hair was in a high pony with some strands draping down in front of her face. Her skin, olive-toned, due to the sun and heat in Onagas. She has hazel eyes with rings of gold around her pupils. There are also freckles on her face, soft facial features, and a small button nose. The handler explained her purpose inside of the maze to the Mighty Ducks. If they ever needed to give up on the competition, they could pull the levers located throughout the maze to return to her, either for a short break or to quit the competition entirely. The handler cautioned the group and reminded them that the purpose of the Feast or Famine is to get to the prize in the middle of the maze before the other teams. Time was of the essence. The Mighty Ducks ventured through the various traps and dangers that lurk within Feast or Famine, running away from sandworms, combating ghoulish creatures as the room filled with water, and dealing with a ghostly minotaur. The Mighty Ducks were able to navigate through half of the maze before running into another competing team, the Scorpion's Trust. After a hard-fought battle, the Mighty Ducks were able to eliminate the competition. With no end to Feast or Famine in sight, the exhausted Mighty Ducks pressed on, after quickly catching their breath. More puzzles and traps awaited them in the latter half of Feast or Famine. A never-ending falling trap occupied the party for an extended period of time, and the party was able to help Alden and the Gutter Rats survive an encounter against waves of skeletons. The encounter with the skeletons left Alden and his friends a bit shell-shocked by the entire experience, and the Mighty Ducks were able to convince them to drop out of Feast or Famine. The Mighty Ducks were successfully able to navigate through the remainder of the maze, and while taking a quick break with the handler, she informed the party that there were only 3 teams remaining in the competition. Groups were either slain or had dropped out at this point. Tending to their wounds accrued during the competition, The Mighty Ducks pushed onward for the final leg of the race, but a looming challenge stood before the party: Zavathul and his desert raiders. Kozan, filled with rage, fury, and vengeance, brutally cut down half of the raiders before turning his focus on Zavathul with the rest of the Mighty Ducks. With the long battle coming to a close, Zar and Eladrian had been knocked unconscious by Zavathul's attacks. Kore unleashed her full magical might and struck down Zavathul, ending the threat that had plagued the White Sand Sea and fulfilling Kozan's vengeance for the death of his tribe. The party, bloodied and bruised, pull up their fallen comrades as they looked over the body of their fallen foe. They discovered, burned into the back of Zavathul, was the insignia of the Crimson Moon. With the threat of the Crimson Moon's vanguard vanquished, the Mighty Ducks only had one more team to contend with in order to be crowned victors of Feast or Famine. The handler, who was riding a high from the excitement of that fight, commended the Mighty Ducks for their triumphs thus far. The party was given a brief reprieve and were able to rest, as the Omen wanted to make the finale between the two final teams more of a spectacle to behold for the people. The Mighty Ducks were awakened by their handler, who signaled that the final leg of the race was about to begin. With a coy smile and a final pull of a lever, the Mighty Ducks were dropped down a chute and deposited out into the final area of Feast or Famine. There were two hallways, separated in the middle by a large wall, but they converged at the very end into a large circular area. In the middle of this space was a spire erupting from the ground. At the top of this spire, something was suspended in the air. The tome of Grandmaster Norvam vibrated inside of Zar's bag. Whatever this object was, it was definitely one of the treasures they were sent here to find. The Mighty Ducks were dropped into this starting area, just behind the other team they needed to beat. Turning around, the Mighty Ducks see that their final remaining team was the Gutter Rats. Alden looked back to Zar with a smirk and a wink. The Gutter Rats then took off down their hallway, which was then immediately blocked off, leaving only one path for the Mighty Ducks to follow. The Mighty Ducks made a mad dash down the hallway and were able to traverse many of the obstacles, but a few of them were slowed down by the traps, resulting in the Gutter Rats getting to the top of the spire first. Alden sat at the top of the spire. He chastised the Omen for not understanding the power of the object he was currently holding. From a distance, it appeared to be some kind of bracer that had a serpentine design to it. Alden slid the bracer onto his arm, pressed something on it, and leapt from the top of the spire. Mid-air, his body transformed into a gaseous form as he slowly descended to the ground. Landing on the ground, he changed back to his physical form, and a look of euphoria was painted on his face. As the Mighty Ducks began to square off for battle, the Gutter Rats' bodies began to bubble and formed into a large gray mass, getting bigger and bigger before sloughing off onto the ground, revealing their true forms. Two of the Gutter Rats appeared to be grotesque, mannequin-like monstrosities, while the other two, including Alden, had a characteristic that a few of the Mighty Ducks had seen before. Crimson eyes stared from the now revealed Duragar known to the party as Kalinar. He wore the same armor he had on back in the Stonecaster Mines, and the tome of Grandmaster Norvam once again vibrated in response from being close in proximity to it. From behind the others, Alden also stared at the party with a smug smile and his very own crimson eyes. An epic battle erupted for the conclusion of Feast or Famine. The crowd cheered and was in awe of what was transpiring, none the wiser to the repercussions that this battle could have on the entirety of Stellaris. The battle was hard fought, but even with many injuries, the Mighty Ducks were able to vanquish Kalinar and Alden in battle, claiming the armor of Hellflame and Serpent's Coil from their dead bodies. As the party reveled in their victory, they witnessed the body of Alden change and morph back to its original form, that of a blue humanoid creature, devoid of any distinguishable features. However, Feast or Famine was yet to be concluded, as the Mighty Ducks needed to escape this final area, as an acidic gas began to fill the room. Midas, who had witnessed how Alden used the serpent's coil, placed the bracer on his arm and activated the item. The serpent's coil sunk its fangs into Midas's hand, and a feeling of euphoria immediately filled Midas's entire being. His body began to change into a gaseous form, and he was able to slip through the walls of the arena to open a pathway for the Mighty Ducks to escape. Exiting out of the Feast or Famine maze, the party was greeted by cheers and applause of the numerous onlookers in the crowd. The Mighty Ducks were crowned champions of Feast or Famine and given the large sum of gold that was collected for the winners. The Whisper then told the Mighty Ducks that the leader of the Omen wished to speak with them in private, after they had had their fill of reveling in the cheers of the crowd. After a time, the Mighty Ducks were escorted to a private area where many members of the Omen were celebrating the success of Feast or Famine. At the back of the room, on a platform that was elevated by a couple of steps, they saw a large, extravagantly designed wooden throne, and in it sat an imposing figure. A cloak was covering their large, muscular body, barely revealing their half-plate armor and areas of exposed, green skin covered in battle scars. The leader of the Omen was wearing a strange mask to conceal their identity. The Whisper invited the party inside as he made his way towards the boss. As the Mighty Ducks introduced themselves to the leader of the Omen, the boss stood up from their throne and began walking towards the group, pacing back and forth in front of each and every one of them until they stopped, reached down, and grappled Czar in a large bear hug. The person behind the mask turned out to be Czar's other, older adoptive sibling, Kataki, whom had set out with Trakus to Onagas a few years ago. The two spent a brief amount of time catching up when the sound of someone approaching from outside the room could be heard. It appeared that the real leader of the Omen was on their way. A body was thrown through the door, bursting it open violently, and the visage of someone familiar to the Mighty Ducks was seen. The handler, who had been cheering them on inside of Feast or Famine, commanded the attention of every Omen member in the room. Czar's siblings, Trakus the Whisper and Kataki the Cleaver, went silent and stood at attention as the leader of the Omen entered the room and sat on the throne at the back of the room. The leader of the Omen began to interrogate the Mighty Ducks about the identity of the Gutter Rats. She had seen the two parties conversating during Feast or Famine, and given that the Gutter Rats were able to keep their true identities a secret, the leader of the Omen wanted to learn more about them. The Mighty Ducks spoke very vaguely about the identity of the Gutter Rats, trying to keep their true mission a secret from this black market organization. The leader mentioned to the party that the bodies of the Duragar and Alden were gone without a trace from the battlefield, seemingly vanishing before being completely bathed and melted by the acidic gas. Seeing that there was not much more to glean from the party, the leader of the Omen congratulated the Mighty Ducks on their victory and asked them to look into a crystal ball for one more additional boon. However, peering into the crystal ball activated a modified memory spell, which erased the memory of the true identity of the leader of the Omen from the minds of the Mighty Ducks. The next thing they knew, the party was back outside in the desert, atop of the staircase that was the entrance to the ruins where Feast or Famine was held. The party was brought back to Onagas, and were rushed by all of the excited citizens who wanted to congratulate the champions of Feast or Famine. Czar, out of nervousness, casted a darkness spell in the middle of the crowd, which caused an instant panic. People began screaming and running in various directions, slamming into one another and trampling over others. The Mighty Ducks were caught up in the chaos, and Czar was forced to break his spell. In the calm, after the chaos, a large Goliath man pushed the crowds aside, making way for Macy Sumcox, whom after a brief rivalry with Dragonista, offered congratulations to the Ducks on their victory. Macy told the party that they could get a break from the crowds by going to the Beauty's Lullaby in the Pleasure District. The party immediately set off in that direction, and at the Beauty's Lullaby, they met Mona, the proprietor of the establishment. She provided rooms for the Mighty Ducks to get away from the crowds for the remainder of the evening. The Ducks very willingly accepted the offer and were able to get some rest after a very exhausting and dangerous day. Before he headed to sleep, Czar writes and sends a paper bird to someone that he had encountered before, keeping this message private from the rest of the party. And Kore is visited by her patron in her sleep, and was bestowed additional power in recognition for her achievements. But the patron will require something in return in the future. The next day, the Mighty Ducks were recognized throughout Onagas as the champions of Feast or Famine. Midas received a paper bird from the Golden Loom, and he got in contact with a prospective supplier of goods for his future designs. Galadriel received a new enchanted instrument from an admirer to add to his growing collection of musical instruments. Dragonista was asked to talk with Macy Sumcox, who had been contemplating leaving the drag lifestyle after receiving a facial scar while participating in the Feast or Famine. Kore's patron instructed her to stay close to Midas and the serpent's coil on his arm. And Zar was summoned to meet with the Cleaver, who was revealed to be his adopted older sister Kataki. She told him that she had not been able to get in contact with Neza using a paper bird. Kataki remembered that Neza mentioned a friend at the Vunith Institute named Sabine that may know more about where Neza is. The Mighty Ducks finished up what they needed to do in Onagas, and as they prepared to head back across the White Sand Sea with Goldie, the Desert Serpent, Kozin met them at the gates of Onagas and profusely thanked the party for allowing him to join them. Without the Mighty Ducks, Kozin would not have been able to avenge his tribe. And while Kozin's future is uncertain, he's forever indebted to the Mighty Ducks. We leave the desert for a brief moment as we transition to an area of gloom and darkness where an emergency gathering of individuals was being held. Surrounded by cave walls, several individuals stand before 5 small funeral pyres. 2 of the pyres were ignited, and on the floor in front of them were 2 bodies, with a dark silken cloth laid over them. Balmorn, Kasna, and Calypsis of the Crimson Moon mourned the loss of their brethren at the hands of the Mighty Ducks. Balmorn chastised Calypsis over the failure of her pet, Zavathul. But Calypsis told Falmorn that Zavathul did exactly what he was instructed to do, disrupt trade between Vrento and Onagas. Calypsis also mentions that Zavathul was her newest pet, and did not compare to the others that she had trained for years. Cutting through their time of mourning was a paper bird that nudged Kasna. Reading the letter, Kasna and Falmorn are filled with rage. Falmorn instructed Calypsis to follow him, and Kasna began a dark ritual that enveloped the corpses of both Kalinar and Nadal. Returning back to the Mighty Ducks, they ventured back across the White Sand Sea. Now used to the sweltering desert heat, the journey back was a much more comfortable ride. The party forged ahead, and Kore recalled the location of the oasis in the desert. Using a new magic item that was awarded to them for winning Feast or Famine, a small magical cottage home, now named the Quack House, they set up camp near the oasis. This provided a much more comfortable refuge for the party on their travels. Midas began to feel the draw of using the serpent's coil to experience that euphoric feeling once again, and eventually, when he is alone, he gave into these cravings. Eladrian and Kore have a heart-to-heart conversation while they relax in the waters of the oasis. Zar focused on honing his magical knowledge with his familiar anything, and Dragonista, still exhausted from the trials in Onagas, got some much-needed rest. The following morning, the Mighty Ducks met with some traders from Glasmont who stopped by the oasis. They were bringing new merchandise to Onagas. Recently, there had been some newly established trade agreements between Onagas and the reclusive city of Glasmont. The traders spoke highly of the capitalistic nature of Glasmont, where those with ambition are greatly rewarded, as well as the arrival of a new fashion designer who is taking Glasmont by storm. Picking up some supplies from these traders and bidding them farewell, the Mighty Ducks pushed through the desert for another day of travel. Dealing with some of the hostile wildlife of the White Sand Sea, the party once again rests comfortably inside the Quack House. Kore and Zar have a conversation in regards to some tension they had between the two of them. While doing so, both of them witnessed a gathering of spirits in the desert. These ghosts bore resemblance to Kozin. The spirits of Kozin's tribe acknowledged the party silently and vanished into the night sky, finally able to rest after being avenged. The next day of travel sees the party arriving back at the first and last outpost to drop off Goldie and continue on to Vrento. Along the way, the party is stopped by a group of militiamen from Vrento who took a job request from a nearby farmer. There had been strange murders of their livestock over the past 5 days, and one of the militiamen had been injured before they could discover what was responsible for the attacks. The Mighty Ducks decided to investigate and help out the farmer and his daughter to help protect their livelihood. The farmer's daughter Lila told the party about seeing some flickering lights above the cornfields late at night. Whenever these lights were seen, cows would be killed come morning. The Mighty Ducks stayed on guard through the night to see if Lila's story held any merit. As the early hours of the morning approached, the Mighty Ducks saw the lights that were mentioned. When investigating, the party was attacked by flaming scarecrows that had clawed and burned through the flesh of the cattle. After defeating these scarecrows and taking a lot of damage in the process, a flaming soul emerged from the cores of one of these scarecrows. It began to pulse and shine, and it began to speak. The flame told the party that the Coven of the Crimson Moon needed a replacement for the sister that was slain. The flame flew into the farmhouse and corrupted the farmer's daughter, Lila. The flaming soul began to twist and deform Lila, slowly turning her into a hag. The farmer begged for the Mighty Ducks to help her, but seeing no other alternative, the Mighty Ducks decided that they needed to kill Lila before her transformation was complete. Dragonista held back the farmer as the rest of the ducks did what needed to be done. They left the scene with the farmer crying over the body of his daughter, the only remaining family he had left. The Mighty Ducks' heart weighed heavily with what they had done. A long night made even longer with the burden on their conscience. They took the time to rest and continued to Vrento. Approaching the gates of the city, they encountered a young mage named Reginald, who had a letter for Zar. A friend of Neza's named Sabine was looking to talk to him. She could be found at the Vunith Institute. Entering into the city of Vrento, the party went directly to the Crimson Sun Temple to inform Grandmaster Shamar as to what had transpired in Onagas and deliver the relics that they had collected. Zar informed Grandmaster Shamar that the tome of Grandmaster Norvam, which once guided them to the relics of the Overlord Baranos, was no longer working. Grandmaster Shamar used his abilities to detect the presence of cursed magic that was affecting the tome. Zar quickly discovered that the cursed energy was coming from the serpent's coil wrapped around Midas's arm. However, Midas was reluctant to give away the serpent's coil, failing to mention to the rest of the group that he was unable to remove it from his arm himself. The serpent's coil had seemingly adhered to the flesh on his arm. Midas grew increasingly uncomfortable with the thought of giving away the serpent's coil. He told the party that he needed to take care of some duties at the Golden Loom, and left the party at the Crimson Sun Temple in a hurry, only to feel the euphoric sensation of the serpent's coil once again as he activated it outside of the temple and flew away somewhere in Vrento in his gaseous form. The rest of the party, concerned about Midas, hurried out of the temple to track him down. And with that, you have caught up with what has transpired thus far in the Crimson Skies campaign. I wish to thank you for sticking it out until the end of this video. The Mighty Ducks and I have had some great adventures, and we'd love for you to come along for the ride. We stream our adventures live on my Twitch channel, so feel free to follow us there to get notifications for when we go live. And if you haven't already, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, where you can find a playlist of all 30 sessions of the Crimson Skies campaign. Until we meet again, I have been your humble dungeon master, aPDTrain.